Hollywood is an industry known for its family values, stable marriages, and overall morality. Oh, wait. No, the opposite of that. But there is at least one couple in the film business that breaks the mold. He's an accomplished actor and filmmaker, and you certainly know her from her iconic roles on shows like The Middle and Everybody Loves Raymond. To discuss how to build a family, protect life, manage to stay married while working in Hollywood, welcome David Hunt and Patricia Heaton. Patricia, David, how are you?
Hi, Glenn.
Hey, Glenn.
How are you?
I am great. It is good to finally talk to you. We've been trying to cross paths with you for a very long time. You are so busy, and you rarely speak. And I appreciate the time. And
oh yes, sure.
Yeah.
I don't speak, but she does.
Dave would beg to differ.
Yeah.
I like to get a word in edgewise.
Right. So let me start with the two of you first. You are a miracle in Hollywood, or in celebrity. You've been married for 30 years, I think, right? Is that right?
We're in our
35th year. And you met on stage. You're both actors. And that I've always heard that usually never works out because somebody's always besting the other one. And when somebody's career's up, somebody else's career's down. I don't know if that's true or not, but did you?
It's a weirder story. It's a weirder story. I sublet his apartment in New York to be closer to the guy I was dating.
It's a longer story, Glenn. I'm actually thinking about writing a movie about it. Joking aside, it's actually an extraordinary story, the way we actually met, because it was a real sliding doors kind of situation.
Yeah.
We discovered once we started dating that we had been working in restaurants on Columbus Avenue in the west side of Manhattan, 2 blocks from each other for about 2 years, and we'd never met. Hers was the only restaurant I hadn't been in that entire strip.
Wow.
And it wasn't until she made a random phone call, which I can tell you that story another time if you want, but asking me if I wanted to sublet my apartment, that we actually met.
And then how long before you dumped the other boyfriend, Patricia?
Well, and you dumped yours. So
it was kind of simultaneous dumping.
Yeah. Yeah.
I hate to use that phrase. That's really unkind. We broke up.
Yeah.
What did Gwyneth Paltrow say? We
consciously uncoupled.
So what is the secret for having a marriage this long? Because a lot of people think it can't be done. My wife and I have been married for 25 years. I mean, it can easily be done. But what is it with you guys?
I thought this morning that it couldn't be done. To be honest.
Yes.
And if it wasn't for a good,
we're here by the skin of our teeth.
Yeah, a miracle we made this call, let alone being married.
Well, George Harrison's wife said in an interview, she said they asked her, "How did you stay together for so long with everything that went on in your lives?" And she said, "We just didn't get divorced."
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the bottom line. I think you both have to have that commitment that you took your vows mean something, and you figure it out. And I think outside of obvious things like any kind of physical abuse or mental or emotional abuse or, something like that, things can be worked out. And you should try to do everything you can, especially I think if you have kids. So it is in a sense of humor.
A sense of humor, I think, is critical. For us, it saved us on many an occasion. But, I have to be honest that it's, and Patty would agree here, that, there have been times when we've had our struggles like anyone else. How can you possibly be with another person for so long? And if you have any kind of real relationship, there's going to be conflict. It's inevitable. It's part of human nature. So the idea that it's going to be perfect is absurd. And I think that's what trips a lot of people up.
After the first blush wears off, things get real.
In our first year of marriage, we were both bringing a lot of emotional baggage into the situation. And, there were a couple of moments where some pots and pans were hurled in my direction. Thank God I was an athlete, because I managed to bob and weave, and it just made a dent in the kitchen cabinet, but not my head. No, seriously.
Well, we're kind of the Bickersons.
We are a little bit of Bickersons, but people seem to get a kick out of it. Somebody suggested recently that the two of us need to do a podcast, and Patty rolled her eyes, and I thought, well, there you go, we're off. That's how it all starts. But there have certainly been ups and downs, and career-wise, just to your point, Glenn, about careers. In the most simplest of terms, Patty was nowhere when I met her, and I had a career that was booming. I made a lot of bad decisions with my career choices. But once we started having kids, that was a total game changer. And I, in fact, quit a couple of big jobs in order to be home because I didn't want to be a Hollywood divorce statistic. And I also wanted to be a father to my sons. I didn't want to be an absent dad. And that resulted in, a 10-year hiatus, or longer than that. Anyway, it was a long time off from my acting career. I basically threw away. But during that time, we started a production company, and that's a whole other story.
Right.
But in the long term, no one is going to care about what movies or Broadway shows I turned down on my deathbed. No one's going to be even thinking about that. But my relationship with my sons and my wife is eternal, and that's worth everything. More than anything.
So, Patricia, let me ask you, because Tanya and I, we have the same kind of relationship. I'm surprised neither of you mentioned faith, because I know God plays such a big role with you. But we've had our moments as well, and exactly, I asked my wife, I was so stupid, asked her for a prenup. And she said, now I'm not interested in marrying you. And I said, why? She said, I'm not negotiating an ending for something that has no ending. You're either in it for life or you're not. And she was right. And she was right. You have to have that. You have to just realize that there's no going anywhere. This is it. So figure it out. And not give up on it. But so, David, you took care of the kids, and Patricia, then I assume you went to work. Do you have? Because I went to work, and there are times when work is, relentless. Do you have any regrets at all about that time period?
No, I tell you what, God was really gracious in that. The job. So everybody Loves Raymond started when we had a 3-year-old and 1-year-old, and I was pregnant with our third. And it's a multicam show. So you rehearse for 4 days from like 9:30 to 5 o'clock, and you can bring the kids to work with you during those times because you're not in front of an audience, and they can, the nanny can bring them, whatever. And so, and you work 3 weeks on and 1 week off. So you're 1 week off every month, and you have 3 weeks off for Christmas, 2 weeks off for Thanksgiving, and then you're finished in like April. So you've got like 3 months in the summer. So it really wasn't like I was away. They were either with me at work or we were all at home together. And Dave didn't completely stop working. He had jobs here and there. We had a nanny. So it really worked out that I could be taking the kids to school in the morning, go to work. They come home at 3, I get home at 5, kind of thing. And there were lots of kids on the set, writers' kids, actors' kids. It was a very family-friendly show and welcoming to everybody with families. So,
and I found that I loved taking the kids to school in the morning and bringing them home. It was weird. I never saw that about myself ever. Yeah. But I found that I just loved it.
Yeah.
Because I loved just being with them. talking about songs on the radio or whatever's happening on the news that day.
And even when
wonderful.
And even when the middle came along, that's a multi-camera show, so it's much longer hours, 12 to 14 hours a day. But they were already in middle school and high school, so they were kind of at school until 5 or 6 o'clock with their activities and things. So God really worked it out. And as far as our relationship goes and our faith, I mean, it's just kind of baked in. You're right. We didn't mention faith, but because we were talking about the practical nuts and bolts, but we feel God has had a hand in everything that's happened in our lives. Obviously,
in spite of myself, He's been there. We met with a wonderful pastor at Hollywood Presbyterian Church, which is where we got married, called Ralph Osborne, God rest his soul. And he the wonderful thing about Ralph was he was able to provide us with the wisdom and the benefit of his long experience. He'd been married at that point, 50-some years. Right. And he said, who do you want to be sitting next to in the twilight of your life? Do you want to be able to look back with a shared history and laugh and bond about something?
And have
grandkids. Or do you want to be alone? And that was, that's obviously a frightening perspective. So that really
stuck with us.
But also one of the biggest influences in our lives, I think, is fair to say, would be Tim Keller, who was the wonderful pastor who ran Redeemer Presbyterian in New York for many years until his passing just a year or so ago. We took his marriage series of tapes very seriously, and he sort of mentored us. And he was always there for us. You'd have a little moment where you think, wow, we haven't been to church in months and we're exhausted. And he said, don't worry, these are all phases in your life. Anyway, things like that. So as I said, in spite of myself, God was gracious enough to keep me on a relatively even keel.
Back with more in a second. You've heard me talk about Relief Factor and how so many people have enjoyed a better, more pain-free life because of it. If you're dealing with pain every day, it makes sense that you would want to try it first. Just see if it works for you. Relief Factor makes that really easy, pain-free too, with their 3-week quick start kit. It's only $19.95. It's easy and it's an affordable way to see how it could literally change your life. Relief Factor is a daily supplement that fights pain naturally. Doctors have developed this. It doesn't just mask the pain temporarily. It helps reduce or eliminate your pain. It actually, you take it every day, not when you're in pain, just every day, and it helps boost your body to do the things it's supposed to do. And the longer you take it, the more effective it is. Trying it couldn't be easier. 3-week quick start, $19.95, less than $1 a day. Takes one phone call, 1-800-4RELIEF, 1-800-4RELIEF, relieffactor.com. Whenever you are having pain, try relieffactor.com. I want to get to the movie that came out, and it's called Unexpected. It's been out, but I found out from you that it is, National Infertility Awareness Month. I didn't know that.
Yes. You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you for that. So, why are you coming out? Why is that important to you?
Well, we have a heart for kids, for sure. We have a lot of. Well, can I backtrack just for a second?
Sure.
Because the movie is based on a book that we optioned way back in 2004. And the book was essentially about a couple that adopts animals. And it's kind of an amusing series of anecdotes. And we wrote scripts based on that. And it never really worked. I turned to the writer after we did a play reading at our house in LA, after this particular reading had sort of died a death. And I said, it needs a different engine. How about we make the couple childless, that they can't have kids, and they go on a journey for adoption.
And that's why they're giving all these animals.
And the animals are a substitute for the children. He said, oh, what a great idea. He called me a week later and said, okay, I've got the first draft. I said, what, in a week? He said, yeah, it just poured out of me. And I said, how come? He said, well, I never told you this, but both my daughters are adopted. And we realized at that moment that we'd hit a nerve. And then when the movie came out, we realized there's so many people that this issue affects.
Oh yeah.
And we've known some close friends who've been through this issue, and it's been incredibly painful. But weirdly, it seems to be a subject that is not talked about very much.
It is
so
because it's hard, I think, for people. And when you don't want to ask your friends, like, are you guys going to have kids? Because you don't know what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And often if they're struggling, then you don't know what to say. And often I think men are left out of the conversation. And one thing this movie did, one of our crew members said to us, was, I'm so glad to see you showing the man experiencing the emotions he's feeling about not being able to have kids, and the struggle he has, because you don't see it as much as you do with the women. And of course, obviously, it's a very powerful thing for women to experience, but that men go through it too.
And here's another example, Glenn. We've screened it all over the place, but we did one particular screening that really hit home, where we had gone out to dinner with the guy who was sort of sponsoring the whole evening. And we do a Q&A afterwards. We walked in about 10 minutes before the end of the screening. There's a woman in the back row playing on her phone, and both of us went, oh, they hated it. So we sort of trudge upstage for the Q&A, and it's silence, no applause, which is unusual because these people politely applaud. And then a woman in the back got up, and she's weeping. And she said, thank you so much for telling this story with such humor and such love. Nobody ever talks about this. My husband and I have struggled with this issue for 2 years. And then one by one, members of the audience started getting up, telling exactly the same story. One guy in the third row, I never forget this. He looked like he just walked off a construction site. He said, my wife and I didn't even know what I was coming to see. My wife dragged me in here tonight. My wife and I have been through this for over a year, and he couldn't even finish his sentence. And then we realized, you know what? We did the best we could, but then God takes over. If it makes a difference in somebody's life, even just for that evening, you've done the best that you possibly can, because all of the rest of it is out of your control. And that's when it came home to us that this is a really important issue that affects people very deeply.
My son is adopted. When Tanya and I got married, we couldn't have children, and we were both healthy and both fine, and just couldn't have children. And it was the hardest 2 or 3 years, I think, of our marriage. I mean, since then we've gone through real hell with some of the kids, but that was the hardest, and it was hard for me because I was watching her question everything about just being a woman, and it was gosh, it's an awful thing. And
yes,
and we finally decided to adopt, and that is frightening because you wonder, is that, how am I going to feel? Is that really? We love our son. He's just the best. I'm sorry, I'm tearing up. My son just went back. He just moved out a couple of months ago, and now he was at home for the weekend, and I just took him to the airport, and it was hard.
Aww.
It's hard.
Yeah,
hard.
It's always hard. It never gets easier.
Yeah, and this movie is also about adoption too.
Well, some of the conversations in the film, they're very authentic, which is why people are hit hard by it. And so I would urge people, especially those people that have been struggling with this issue. And if you haven't had a chance to see it yet, Glenn, I would encourage you to watch it, because some of the conversations were lifted verbatim from the writer's own experience with his own wife. But we don't pull any punches, so it's not a sentimental look at this issue. But it's not dark.
It's actually a quirky comedy.
Yeah,
that kind of takes as the title suggests, an unexpected twist. And to come at it that way, so it's not, it doesn't come off as heavy. It actually comes off as fairly light and goofy to begin with. And
There are some gut-wrenching moments.
Yeah, toward the
There's
end.
one
But
scene in particular that I must have seen 1,000 times, and I weep every single time.
Right.
And I know what it's coming.
but you know, coming from a comedy background, I think when you open people's hearts up with laughter,
Yes.
and they literally physically get energized by laughing at the beginning of a movie, then they're primed to just really receive, you know, the movie. And it's had a real great impact on our audiences.
10 million women
It's
between
available on Amazon Prime.
okay, 10 million women between 15 and 49 either aren't able to get pregnant or to maintain a pregnancy. Is that number going up? Has it always been that high?
You know what? I'm not sure.
Well, I do believe that it is going up because there's also a problem with fertility rates.
Right.
In Western culture, period, as we all know, the birth rate in Western countries has declined
Horrible.
precipitously. Yeah. And men also, for some reason, there seems to be, and it could be environmental, could be many reasons, but men's sperm count has plummeted.
What do you think this is?
Gosh, I don't know.
You know, pot reduces your sperm count. So if you're smoking pot, marijuana, that's not good for your opportunities.
Stress and anxiety, all of those.
And I
things.
think, you know, for me, the jury's out on RFK, but I think he has the right direction of like wanting to clean up what's in our food.
Yes.
I think, and so I think there's a lot of chemicals there that are probably affecting, you know, people's health. And a big part of that is your fertility. It's
amazing to me how arrogant we are with such important things. Food, AI that is coming. We just think that, oh yeah, we can, let's genetically modify all of our food and it'll be fine. And I think we're just starting to see the real ramifications of that.
Yeah, and I think it's super complicated because I remember sitting on the set of The Middle having this discussion about modified food. And on the one hand, you know, you want to know what they're using to spray crops to make them, you know, so large, and what they're clumping up chickens with and all that kind of thing. On the other hand, the ability to the world that feeds the world.
I know.
So there's got, you know, it's not
to be some sort of link there because it's beyond coincidence.
Right. But there's a balance that, and I think it's hard to know until maybe sometimes it goes a little too far. Then you realize, oh, we have to pull back. So,
but also there are certain societal pressures, you know, and people are trying to get pregnant much later in life.
Yes, that's
an
issue.
People are getting married in their early 20s, and you know, as they did in generations past.
Right.
I mean, my mom was she was 20 when she had me, I think, something like that, 21. And that's, you know, that's almost unheard of these days.
Yeah, I know. And I think it's a huge mistake. I mean, I would have 10 children if I could, because there's nothing better. There is nothing better. And you do get to an age where you're like, this is really all that life is about, is just that.
Yes.
And,
and
100%. You get to a point in your life too, if you waited so long, A, you reduce your chances of being able to have your children, and B, you get so old, you know, that you're like, I don't have time. I can't keep up with you. I'm really tired. I'm really tired.
Yeah. When you're talking to your 6-year-old saying, just push me in the chair. Well come on.
Got daddy in a stroller.
Or feed daddy.
Yeah.
It's the Shakespearean cycle of life, right?
Right.
But, I'm with you, Glenn. I think if Patty and I had met younger, there's no question we would have had more kids.
One or two more, maybe. We have 4.
Yeah.
But we didn't have our first child until I was 35, and then we like cranked them out.
Yeah.
So it's fantastic, and it's difficult. It's the hardest thing you'll ever do.
And it seems like it's never going to end. And then and then when they move out, you're like, what happened? What?
Right.
What happened?
Yeah.
It's so fast.
A friend of ours once said, who had 6 kids, by the way, we went to see him before we had kids, and all these kids are running around, and we staggered out of his house, having not been able to finish a sentence for the entire afternoon.
Yeah.
And said, that's it. We're not having kids. Cut to, here we are with all ours. But he said, get some sleep when we first got pregnant. And we just laughed like, oh, I haven't slept since 1993.
Yeah.
Right.
It's never the same, but I wouldn't trade it for anything.
So what is unplanned childlessness?
Is that when you run out of time?
I think it is, yeah.
Yes.
That happens, I think, a lot now because people are, you're now an adolescent until you're almost 30 in our society, which is crazy.
Yes.
I don't know when you actually become adult in our society anymore, but then you're 30, 35,
I'm still working on that.
40, it's over. I mean, for children.
Yes. Yes. And I think the society we've lost a bit of it's all about self-fulfillment a lot. And there's nothing wrong with feeling like you're using your gifts and you're helping in the world and you're contributing, whatever. But I think you don't really discover yourself and your strengths and whatever until you're stretched the way kids stretch you. And I think what's happened in society is that you can't have kids until you find yourself. But I would say you don't find yourself truly until you have kids.
Yeah.
And so, and I feel like we're really in a place now where, because even though it's not as big now as it was during the pandemic, but there is remote work. And when I was long ago working with a group called Feminist for Life, this was 20 years ago, they kept pushing for remote work for, working moms, and nobody would do it. And then the pandemic happened and it was all remote work. And now it's a part of how we live. And so I think for women, there's not a better time to have kids and be working if you have to do that than now, because there's ways to work it out. And and a lot of corporations are willing to supply their workers with those opportunities to be moms also. So I think it's a better time to be a mom.
I would contend, Glenn, this might be a wee bit controversial, but I would contend that there are some aspects of the feminist movement that have been tremendously damaging to women. And of course, I'm talking specifically about the idea that motherhood is a terrible thing and it's a prison for women, which is, in fact, the complete opposite. Having children, in my humble opinion, is incredibly liberating on so many levels, because it absolutely destroys your narcissism. Your self-involvement.
So true.
There's no time for it. You got to pick up the poop, for goodness sake. You haven't got time to think about anything else. And that's a wonderful thing, especially for a narcissistic egomaniac like myself.
Yeah. It's it does. It keeps you humble. That's absolutely for sure. People say,
also I think there's been a movement. Oh, I'm so sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say that there's also, in certain sections of society, I've witnessed children being viewed as a kind of not an appendage, but kind of like an accessory to this wonderful life. You go to Italy and places like that where kids are swarming around and are so much a part of the culture and are beloved by everybody. Nobody grimaces when a child is crying on a plane. I mean, the looks we used to get when we would bring our kids on airplanes.
I know.
I mean, I just thought, oh my goodness, who are you people?
But fortunately, our kids were super well behaved. So we always got compliments at the end of the flight. People were like, oh, we were so worried.
There's something in that I find just a little troubling.
We also live in a society where things are deemed so bad, especially with like climate change, which, boy, that's interesting. But climate change, I hear people all the time, I don't want to bring children into this world. What if it does? I mean, there's nobody. I am a optimistic catastrophist in my worldview. But there's no, I mean, what if you're wrong? What if you're wrong?
Right.
And even if you're right, what about the child that would have been born that
Correct.
solves the problem?
Correct.
I mean, come on.
Yeah. There's always been that group that says that there's a population bomb. What is his name? Paul
Ehrlich.
Yeah. And it's all BS. It's all BS. It's a matter of being able to have resources, getting to where they need to get to. That's the only problem. We have a lot of food that's wasted on this planet. There's countries that have not been developed because of the corruption of their governments, but there's nothing wrong with having lots of people. More people, the better. We just have to have the infrastructures and the resources properly dispersed.
Especially in this country, though, that is not hard to do. When you drive across the country and you see the vast amounts of empty land.
Yes.
We are
correct.
We are so far away from our planet not being able to handle the amount of people.
Sustain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on IVF?
Well, I'm Catholic. We're both Catholic, even though we were in the Presbyterian world for a long time. Still Catholic, practicing Catholic.
All the way from Church of England to Catholicism.
Yeah, I dragged him kicking and screaming. So personally, and we didn't have to go through this, but I have thought about this a lot. I don't have any judgment of people who use IVF. No judgment. I personally would probably not do it. And I just feel like once you start doing stuff in laboratories and you take it, and listen, there's married couples who do this, and it's their sperm and their egg, and it's their kids, and that they just couldn't conceive in the natural way, and whatever. As I said, I have no judgment, but just as a Catholic. The reason the church, and I don't even know actually what the church's actual position on IVF is, but it's once you start taking it outside, then many iterations of that start to happen, and then you have surrogacy, and there's issues with surrogacy, and then you have people kind of purchasing children and then designing children, and it's a marketplace type thing now too, and then there's all these kids in foster care and who are waiting to be adopted.
Yeah.
And, so it turns into this thing. As I said, I don't judge. I have friends who used IVF. I'm so happy they have their children. I have friends who have used surrogates, very happy for their beautiful kids. I personally wouldn't do it. But we've never had to deal with it.
Yeah,
so maybe it's easier for me to say.
But to play down the issue, I mean, the question can be posed, what's wrong with a little medical assistance?
Yeah.
On the flip side of that is the danger that we end up with an Aldous Huxleyan world, the Brave New World of designer children, and
we're
everyone
close
gets
to that.
what they want. And we are very, very close to that, and we've flirted with that. And in the gray area, in between what we might conceive as right and obviously completely wrong, there's a lot of abuse. The sperm banks and all that kind of thing. That's a whole other issue. But there's always abuse because human beings are deeply flawed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just read something from the founders. I was giving a speech for a pro-life group last week, and I'm trying to remember which founder it was, but not a founder that any of us have really heard of. He's the only guy that was signed the Declaration, the Constitution, and was a Supreme Court justice. And he wrote right around the founding of when does a child become a child? When is it? When is their life? And he said, as soon as it stirs, the quickening they used to call it. As soon as it stirs, as soon as mom knows that there is life inside of her. But that is just that measurement is we know almost right away now. We can know there's life inside of you almost immediately. So everything just seems to be getting closer and closer, and it's, you don't want to be wrong on this whole life thing. At least I don't.
No. And, Yeah, I think you can completely support, the pro-life position from an atheist point of view. It's really human rights and civil rights.
Yeah,
And the question is, when does life begin? And all science will tell you it begins at conception,
right.
and it's a human life. So I think, that's how I've come to my position, I think.
I think we've changed as a people. I could never join the pro-life people that were out with the abortion trucks, or shouting at
Yeah.
people,
Yeah.
because most cases, the women that are going are not the serial, abortion
Right.
stops. They're the ones who don't feel like they have any support whatsoever. They feel trapped. They don't know what to do. And you're starting to see now, as pro-life people will talk to those moms once they see an ultrasound. That's the big thing. Once they see an ultrasound,
Yes.
and then you talk to them, sometimes it's pretty easy to solve the problems that are causing mom to think, I can't have a baby,
Right. And there's been interesting phenomenons, like a woman will find out she's pregnant, she wants to abort, and then they find out it's twins and she doesn't want to abort. Like there's weird, stuff that makes people change their mind. And I think it's interesting that at a place like Planned Parenthood, they don't want to show you the ultrasound.
Yes, I know.
They're not, so, there's definitely a movement where they are invested in abortion. And if it were really truly a pro-choice situation, maybe I wouldn't have that much difficulty, but I don't think it's really pro-choice. There's a very vast amount of people who are committed to making sure they happen.
Yeah, it's a really dark agenda. Really dark.
Yeah, really dark.
Just from my personal male perspective, when our eldest son was 7 weeks old in the womb, and I remember seeing the very first ultrasound, I have to confess that up to that point, any views I may or may not have had on abortion were fuzzy at best. I think I was in that kind of that shameful male school of like, it doesn't really affect me kind of thing. Well, when I saw his little tiny heart beating in the middle of what was basically the size of a lima bean, I completely fell apart. I was destroyed because I'd seen it in a way that was so real that I'd never seen before, that I could never go back.
My first daughter was born with cerebral palsy, and she had strokes at birth. And they said, at this time, I'm a 19-year-old kid. I don't know what I'm doing. You know what I mean? And so the doctors are, taking her in for CAT scans, and she just fit in the little headrest. I'll never forget. And the doctors came back, and they had a scan, and they said, black means blood is bad. And they took out the scan, and it was almost all black. And I said, what does that mean? And they said, she probably won't feed herself. She probably won't talk, walk, ingoing, outgoing speech, all of these horrible, horrible things. And to my shame, if you would have said that to me before she was born, I probably would have said, that's no life. That's no life.
Right.
I have learned, my daughter is not like that. She graduated from college, and she's the joy of my life. And she's taught me more than any other human alive. It's remarkable how we don't know. Doctors don't know. And even if it turns out that what we deem as bad, it's actually not bad.
Right. And, just to hear that story, we know so many parents who have kids with special needs, Down syndrome, autism, all kinds of stuff. And I think that's one thing where if we were going to step up more than pro-life people already have is really getting the government, and there is a lot of support. You get Social Security if you have a disability and what have you, but really communities supporting and including parents, supporting parents with disability and including parents with kids with disability, excuse me. And I see it a little, as many problems as the UK have. I feel like I see that a lot out in public more with kids with disabilities. And that's a really important part of, I think, that our government should continue to focus on, is making sure all those parents have help. But parents who have kids with disabilities, they do a really incredible job of making those things happen in their community. Almost all those great programs that you find for kids with issues have been started by parents who couldn't find any program and so started it themselves.
It's really disturbing to me to see what's going on in Canada with MAID, where now they're talking about it can be depression, kids, teenagers, doesn't matter. I mean, this is a death cult, an absolute death cult.
Well, when you have socialism running something and people are costly who have disabilities to care for, and then the government is much more likely to say, here's a way out of your pain, and then it gets them off of their role, so they don't have to pay anymore. That's a huge problem with socialism, the kind of medicine they have there. I'm not saying what we have here is by any means perfect, but to have a solution to a problem be killing yourself is really reached rock bottom.
Yeah. I spoke to a guy who runs Singularity University, Ray Kurzweil. He's a leader in AI. And he told me once, you only have to live until 2030, Glenn, because then there will be no death. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, we'll be able to download you into a computer. And I said, Ray, that's not life. And he said, oh yes, it is. What's the difference? And I said, well, soul. And he said, you can't prove that there's a soul. And I realized, you want to talk about made on steroids. If grandma, grandpa, anyone gets sick, don't worry, they'll live forever. We don't have to treat that. Let's just put them out of the pain. We'll download them. They'll be with you forever. I mean, it's a
oh my gosh,
it's a terrifying world. Oh my gosh,
that's so. When you first mentioned AI, I'm like, I find that AI useful. Now I'm going like, oh my gosh, AI.
Oh yeah, there's things.
There, Glenn.
Yeah, sorry. It's just that we people haven't thought. I've thought about this since the 90s. Been studying AI, and it is tremendous what's coming. It is also a horror show what's coming, and the scary thing is nobody's dealing with it. Nobody's thinking about these deep issues. And if we treat AI like we treated social media, we're doomed. We're absolutely doomed.
Right. But how would you legislate for something that isn't here yet? Like, what do you do about it at this point before it's become that kind of reality?
The biggest thing you do is, you put guardrails on personhood. You cannot be digital and a person, because that's where it's going to slip out of our fingers. Is people will declare that it will eventually declare personhood, and that's not very far away. There are people right now.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying.
People right now that think that that's their boyfriend and they're in love with their boyfriend, and it's AI, and you don't want anywhere near this. We have to think that's not a person ever.
Is anybody doing any kind of thinking about legislation about those things? Is there anybody looking at that?
There are. There's one guy, two guys that were both ethicists. One I think was from Google, and I'm not sure where the other one was from. And they realized that there's no ethics here. They were the ethicists, and they were like, guys, we got to stop and have a conversation. There were no ethics. They're moving. Ethicists. Yeah, they're moving too fast. Yeah. And we'll get to that later. And I was reading I was reading a quote from Jefferson, and he used newspapers, but I just changed the newspapers to social media. He said, a man is much more educated if he never reads anything at all over a man who only reads the newspapers. And I would suggest if you change newspapers to social media and we're educating ourselves on social media, you're an imbecile if that's where you get all of your information, And look how fast that changed.
50% an imbecile. Dave will tell you. I'm always like,
but I know you do other things. You're not getting your education from social media. Now's an appropriate time to take a break and tell you about preborn. There is an awful lot that feels broken in this world. It is really super easy to feel powerless, like you'd love to do something to help, but you don't know how to do it. So in the end, you don't. Well, don't just shake your head and walk away from it all. Here's the truth. You can do something to bring tremendous good into the world. You can be part of the change we all want to see. Right now across this country, there are women facing unplanned pregnancies, and many of them are terrified. Many of them are buying into the lie that the best thing they can do is to have an abortion. But the Ministry of Preborn is working to help them see another way. They offer free ultrasounds, counseling, and even postnatal help to those women who just need somebody to show them love and compassion, not judgment. The majority of the time, that's all it takes to save a life. You can do good in this world by helping Preborn in their mission to preserve life, moms and babies. Please dial pound 250, say the keyword baby. That's pound 250, keyword baby, or go to preborn.com/Glenn. That's preborn.com/Glenn, sponsored by Preborn. Let me go back to Hollywood. They're trying to move Hollywood to Austin, Texas, which scares the heck out of me, seeing that I'm in Dallas, Texas. And I know you guys got away from Hollywood as soon as you could.
Yeah, we're trying to move it to Nashville.
Yeah.
We're actually trying to raise money specifically for that, to build a film and TV industry and theater industry outside of the, LA, New York bubble.
So how do you do that and not bring all of the crap that comes with it?
Well, in Tennessee, in their legislature, when they're working to set up kind of funding and rebates and stuff, they're putting things in there like it has to be certain type of content, so they wouldn't ever give rebates to. Well, you have to, but pornography or anything that puts down.
But ultimately,
state
you have to trust the content creators, Glenn, which is what it comes down to. Which is why we're hoping people would back us. Given the history that we have and the kinds of projects that we've already produced. So again, it's tricky, but we've heard that from politicians. Oh, we don't want
Hollywood values.
And I'm not even sure what Hollywood values are, because that's kind of an oxymoron. Oops, sorry, all my friends in LA. So it's a tricky one, but ultimately you have to. I think the content creators have to prove themselves, really. There's an enormous underserved audience in the United States.
Huge.
Actually, globally. I would suggest globally. There are stats available for that that show that people want content. They want good entertainment. And it's not that you have to make, just Billy Graham movies. No disrespect to Billy Graham, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do.
You don't have to make sentimental nonsense. You can still produce things with excellence and have great stories that don't shy away from the reality of the human condition. But people want to see hope. They want to see redemption. They want to see forgiveness. These themes that have been so absent for so long. And, I do have to say this, and this probably will get me some enemies, but
You don't have to say it, but go
I
ahead.
don't have to say it, of course. Maybe I should shut up right now. Hello, ladies.
Right before we take that show out to pitch.
Now you've thrown me. Now I can't.
Sorry. That was my cunning plan.
It was a brilliant plan because it worked. Maybe I shouldn't say anything.
Well, but we found that the kind of people who are attracted to Nashville, who are moving to Tennessee, share those values, and they're leaving Hollywood or New York or Chicago because they have felt not at home for so many years,
Sure.
and feel that their worldview and the stories they want to tell aren't being told, or Hollywood doesn't want to tell them. Although it's weird because I think, there's a certain bottom line also to Hollywood. They need to make money, and I think they would like to tap into this space, and they kind of don't know how. So I feel like we're seeing them kind of, when you see Angel Studios or Andy Irwin at Kingdom Story, you see John Irwin has the Wonder Project now, and it's out there and it's coming.
We're trying to do the same thing. Look, in 2008, we made a movie called Amazing Grace about the abolition of slavery in the British Empire.
So good.
And we, in a sense, you could say that we were ahead of our curve, but what we didn't have was the financial backing to really continue that in any significant way. I think now the environment is a little different, and there's an economic shift going on, there's also a cultural shift going on, and I think people are more receptive, both in the investment community and in the marketplace, for content that's more like that, shall we say, in the most general sense.
It's really stunned me how, for the longest time, Christians did not know how to make movies because all they cared about was the message. And just got to get the message. And you're like, I can't bring my friends to this. I want to, and I can't bring my friends to this because they're going to just be beaten over the head with the message. And Hollywood had it right. Now, if you look at Snow White, all they care about is message. We've switched places.
Interesting. That's an interesting observation.
You even look at House of David, which I think is Irwin.
That is just John Irwin at Wonder Project.
And I know that's about the Bible, but it's not pounding in your face. It's a great story, just a great story.
Yes.
And it's so weird how we've just switched places. I wonder how long it's going to be before they wake up and go, oh, they don't want message movies.
Well, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm just about to do a little bit on The Chosen, which I'm actually really looking forward to. I think Hollywood is all about money. Somebody once joked to us that Hitler could have showed up in Hollywood if he had a great script under his arm. They would have said, yeah, sorry about that whole Holocaust thing, Adolf. We want to make your movie because we think it's going to make us a lot of money. And that's the harshest way of looking at it. In the same way, they're looking at this space going, well, so many of our movies are tanking because of the message we keep sending out. So how do we? They don't really know.
I know
who this audience is. They don't know how to speak to them. We do. So let's use your show as a plug to anybody out there with a couple of dollars in the bank.
But I also think that it used to be. So my favorite movie of all time, Dave, sick of hearing me say this, is On the Waterfront. With Marlon Brando, Eva Marie Saint, and Carl Malden plays the priest at this mob-run, dock in New York, and Marlon Brando's brother is a mobster, and Marlon Brando's on the take, and he has to make a decision as to whether he's going to rat out on his brother and turn in the mob. And it's this big moral decision. And Carl Malden, as the priest, has this incredible monologue. I don't know, you probably saw it many years ago, but if you haven't watched it or haven't seen it in a long time, watch it again. This was an Oscar-winning Hollywood movie. Right. To me, the greatest movie ever made. Greatest script, music, acting, directing, everything. And it has Carl Malden doing a whole thing about Christ being here on the docks and Christ seeing what's happening to you. And how would he, who spoke up against every evil, feel about your silence? It's this beautiful monologue. And that wasn't considered a faith-based film.
No, I know.
It was just a great story about a moral dilemma. And God was just a natural part of that, because it used to be in our country, we all shared certain foundational beliefs about God, about history, about our country. And that's kind of been blowing up for so many years through universities. And so people have a really distorted view of this country. They don't have, you can criticize America. There's lots of things, a lot of room for improvement, but I've traveled with World Vision to a lot of different countries, and to say this country is a terrible place, it's ridiculous.
What it's being replaced with is even more terrifying. I'm watching the stats on anti-Semitism is terrifying. I said when I was at Fox in 2008, I said, if we allow this to grow now, we will see on our streets the exact kind of hatred that was happening in the 1930s in Europe. It'll be happening here. And everybody mocked me for it. And here we are. It is terrifying. Terrifying what's going on.
Yes. And imagine how Jewish people feel.
I know.
I mean, this is what,
Well, there's a lot of problems. Obviously, the education system in this country is in desperate need of massive reform, particularly at the higher education level. But as G.K. Chesterton once said, if you don't worship God, or you don't believe in God, then something's going to have to rush into that vacuum.
Correct.
In the end, you'll believe in anything, anything at all.
Right.
You just make it up tomorrow. And that's what we're seeing. And you're seeing 21st century postmodernist nonsense, idiotic nonsense, pervasive in major learning institutions in this country, peddling crap. I'm sorry, there's no other way to describe it.
Oh, yeah.
It's lies. It reminds me a lot of the Soviet Union. It reminds me of the kind of, that to me is the Orwellian nightmare, is the way that young people's hearts and minds are changed by being perpetually told that especially if you're white, you're bad, you're the problem. Western civilization is the problem. I've heard people in interviews, the street interviews. Oh, well, America's a country built on racism. And you just hold your head in
colonization.
It's like, oh my God. There's so much ignorance out there that it's really hard to counter that.
So how is
what I think is even what I think is even scarier is if you take a person who's sort of indoctrinated and you can show them the facts. You can show them Hamas body cam footage that they themselves put on social media. They put on the internet, and they will deny that what they're seeing with their own eyes. Like, you can look at history, look at the Bible, say this. If you want to know where the Jews' land is, just read this, 5,000-year-old book,
right?
And you'll see where they were, and they'll deny it. That's what's worse. It's one thing to have, we'll always have misinformation out there, but when you give people facts and they refuse to accept them, then I don't know where you go.
I've never really understood. This didn't even mean anything to me until recently, that the root of the word culture is cult. And the culture that we have right now is becoming a cult. It's driving you away from your family. It's telling you don't listen to your friends, change your friends if it disagrees with the cult leader. I mean, it's frightening. It's frightening. Our culture is becoming a cult. You guys started, what is it? What is the organization that you did? The October 7th Coalition. Yeah, okay.
7th Coalition, 07C. Yes, and that happened after I saw that body cam footage, and I just expected a huge outcry across America against what had happened in Israel, and it was like crickets. And we live in a city where many there's more churches per capita here than I think any other city in the country, and so many people have been to Israel. They love Israel. A lot of them don't know their own Jewish neighbors at home when they come back. And I think I just felt like something needed to be done. How can Christians, give people the benefit of the doubt? I think more pastors need to stand up. And they're very afraid to offend Muslims is the problem.
You know
they're
what?
Afraid to offend Muslims.
It's our pastors and our pulpits that have failed us. They usually do in bad times, but that is the root of the problem. They have got to stand up and lead.
Yes, they do. And what we're trying to do is find, our motto is to activate Christians to be visibly and vocally supportive of the Jewish people of Israel's right to exist and to fight anti-Semitism. And we've been going city to city, putting unity dinners together, getting Christians and Jews together. It's fine in peacetime. Jewish people are doing Jewish things. Christians are doing Christian things. But in times like these, we have to be united.
Yes, we do.
And we have to be very vocal. The other side is really well funded. They're really well organized, and they've indoctrinated a lot of people.
This is a battle for Western civilization.
Yes.
It cannot be understated. I know for myself, October the 8th, I'm looking at thousands of people on the streets of London with placards and banners that seem to have been miraculously produced inside about 12 hours after the attacks.
Interesting.
And you go,
pro-Hamas.
Well, yeah, the pro-Hamas stuff. And you go, okay, well, clearly this is orchestrated. Clearly it's a campaign. And then when the Prime Minister of Great Britain comes out and says Islamophobia is the biggest problem in the United Kingdom, which is a lie. You talk to the intelligence communities and they will tell you where the real issues are. So, right-wing white supremacism and, oh gosh, it's terrifying. It's a massive, massive issue. And people do not understand the propaganda behind all of this. What's frightening to me is it happened so quickly and people bought into it immediately. And that's what I find so distressing about it.
Well, and it's hard to figure out why, other than just Jew hatred, because there isn't a real. It doesn't make sense. And so you get back to that the kernel of the question is why the Jew hatred, which is the question Jews have been asking since they've been hated, which is since they were formed. And I feel as if you're a person of faith, you can see why. Because Jesus came through the Jewish people, that would be one of Satan's main places to attack is the Jewish people. I think because of Christ coming through them. If you wanted to look at it from a spiritual point of view.
If you believe in Satan, when Satan heard God say to Abraham, your people are my people, and I'm going to protect them forever, you'll have a group of 300, 500 people stand there. Satan has got to go. All they have to do to get him to break his promise, which God can't do, and I win, is break that. So it's 16 million now. It's not that hard. I can still win. I think it's the root of all of this stuff is evil. It's all evil. It's all tied together. The death cult.
Yes.
I mean, the Jewish people are the ones that were the first ones to say life, choose life. And look at
Yes, and you go over there, and they're welcoming.
Yeah.
I mean, look, Israel has their own issues, but it's just a wonderful, welcoming, warm place for all people. It's a vibrant place. They produce so much science and technology, and they want peace. They've never started a war. They want peace, and they've never broken a ceasefire. They want peace. And so, I think, we were just listening to a guy talking about radical Muslims are probably 15%, 20%, maybe the population.
Just 20%, that still represents
15 million people.
Tipping point, but the tipping
of radical
probably means about 200 million Muslims are radicalized.
Right, and the tipping point, remember, is only about 17 to 21% of a population. If they're really dedicated to that amount of a population, any population make the difference.
Yes,
there are cities in Britain where that's already been passed. But I just want to go back for the educational component, because this is so critical, and this applies to churches as well as schools. And that is that even if you don't teach the apologetics of Christianity, even if that's a secondary concern, if you just taught the history. It would make a massive, massive, massive difference to the way people view the world. The fact is that there's an entire generation of young people in the West, who have no clue haven't been taught that at all because it's been eviscerated from syllabuses across the land. And that's a very, very dangerous
Was it
place to be.
Hitchens?
Yeah.
I think it was Hitchens that said, you can't read Shakespeare without the Bible. You have to teach the Bible or you won't understand Western culture at all.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And it by the way, you can teach it as a purely historical document, which is what it is. You know,
Right.
I mean, to ban it from schools is ludicrous.
Yeah.
Well, you're also this, you know, people do, I hate to go on a rant, but just a mini one. When people go on about justice, you know, I want to sit them down and stare them right in the face and say, do you have any idea where the whole concept of justice came from? It comes directly from the Jewish and the Christian traditions.
Right.
It did not exist on planet Earth until that happened.
Yeah.
It just didn't. You know, you can go back and look at all of the others and all the other movements at the time. And anyway.
Thank you for all that you guys do. You're wonderful. Thank you for everything you do. Thanks for all the laughs that you've provided and all the joy. Thank you sincerely.
Well, thanks for having us. This is
us
so much fun to talk to you. Yeah.
It's really a lot of fun. I feel like I could do it for hours.
Yeah.
If you watch the film, Glenn, would you just do us the honor of at least shooting us a text or an email? And
letting us know
what you
Yeah, I will.
Yeah.
I will. God bless you guys. Thank you.
appreciate that very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
God bless.
Glenn.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. Bye.